The evening shift was changing at New York Presbyterian Hospital, and the lobby carried that familiar mix of exhaustion, voices, and rolling carts. Kimberly adjusted her grip on her daughter. Her scrubs still creased from a long day in pediatrics. A loose curl had slipped free from the bun she'd thrown together at sunrise, brushing against her cheek each time she moved. Laura rested her head on her mother's shoulder, playing with the sleeve of Kimberly's white coat. It had been a difficult case that afternoon. A child with an asthma flare-up that pushed Kimberly's focus to its limit. All she wanted now was to get her daughter home, warm dinner on the table, and a quiet night to breathe. They were steps from the sliding doors when it happened. A voice, faint at first, drifted across the lobby. A voice she knew. A voice she had forced herself to forget. Kimberly stopped in place, as if her shoes had fused to the floor. Her hand tightened around Laura instinctively. The sudden movement made her bag slip down her shoulder, and a small pack of baby wipes tumbled out, scattering across the tiles. Kimberly didn't even reach for them. Her breath stalled mid-inhale. It can't be him. Not here. Not today. But her heart recognized the sound before her mind wanted to accept it. For a moment, she closed her eyes, trying to steady herself. The hospital noise faded beneath the pounding in her ears. She had spent years learning how to stand firm again, years rebuilding, years raising a child alone, years refusing to let this particular memory control her. Another word from across the lobby floated toward her, clearer this time, unmistakable. Kimberly exhaled sharply, as if the world had punched the air from her lungs. She turned. Across the lobby, under the warm overhead lights, stood David. Not the David she once held close, not the man who once promised forever, but a version of him shaped by time. He looked older, a little weathered, but unmistakably the man she had loved, the man who had walked away without turning back. His eyes widened the moment he recognized her. Then he saw the child in her arms. Something broke across his face. Shock, disbelief, then something deeper, something that looked like regret wrapped in longing. His gaze locked on Laura, with a force that made Kimberly's chest tighten painfully. Kimberly felt everything at once, anger sizzling under her skin, her heart racing like it remembered an old rhythm, a wave of fear rising as memories she buried clawed their way up. Old affection, old hurt, old hope. All of it clashed violently inside her. Laura shifted in her arms, sensing the tension. She lifted her head and followed her mother's line of sight. The little girl blinked at the man staring back at them, studying his face with innocent curiosity. Then her soft voice floated into the charged air. "Mommy, why is that man looking at us like that?" The question struck harder than anything else could have. David's expression collapsed. His jaw tensed. His eyes reddened almost instantly. Kimberly's pulse hammered in her ears. She forced her feet to move, forcing herself toward the exit, not running, but desperate to reach the cool air outside before her emotions betrayed her. The automatic doors opened slowly, far too slowly for her racing heart. Behind her, David didn't move. He stood frozen, staring at the child who carried his eyes. Kimberly stepped out into the fading evening, clinging to the only thing grounding her, the weight of her daughter in her arms. This moment, unexpected, overwhelming, and years too late, would change everything again. Welcome to Mr. Stevens Stories, where powerful life lessons are shared through unforgettable storytelling. If you're new here, we're glad to have you. Subscribe and join us for more inspiring stories that motivate, uplift, and open the mind. Also, comment your time and location while watching this story. Mount Zion Community Church sat on a lively Harlem corner, surrounded by brownstones, street vendors, and the warm hum of neighborhood life. On that particular Saturday afternoon, the fellowship hall buzzed with movement. Volunteers sorting supplies, families chatting while waiting for checkups, laughter spilling from the children's section, where colorful stickers and crayons covered folding tables. Kimberly stood near the check-in area, scanning through a stack of informational pamphlets she'd been arranging for the past 10 minutes. The smell of fresh brownies blended with the faint scent of disinfectant drifting from the makeshift medical stations. It was a blend she had grown used to. Half community event, half clinic, and despite the long hours involved, it grounded her in a way the hospital never fully could. Her white coat hung open over jeans and sneakers. A pen stuck out from the curls near her ear because she'd forgotten she tucked it there. A few strands had escaped from her bun already, but she didn't bother fixing them. She was focused on the long line forming near the blood pressure booth. That's when she heard someone grunting softly near the doorway, struggling with something heavy. She glanced up. A man in a fitted navy suit, sleeves rolled down and tie perfectly knotted, carried a large box overflowing with bottled water and first aid kits. He looked like someone who should have been stepping out of a boardroom, not hauling supplies at a church event. He nearly bumped into a table, catching himself at the last second. The volunteer beside Kimberly called out, "Dr. Jackson, can you direct this gentleman? He's from one of the sponsors." Kimberly lifted her head fully, expecting a quick yes-no interaction, the kind she'd handled dozens of times. Instead, she froze. The man looked up at her, warm blue-gray eyes, slightly flushed cheeks from exertion, a polite, almost shy smile. Not the sort of expression she imagined from a man dressed in a suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "Hi," he said with a breathless laugh, shifting the box in his arms. "I'm David. They told me you're in charge." Kimberly blinked once, then regained her composure. "One of the organizers." "Yes," she answered, offering the professional but friendly tone she used with new volunteers. "I'm Dr. Kimberly Jackson. Please, just call me Kimberly. You can put that box over near the blood pressure station." He nodded and carried the supplies across the room with surprising steadiness. When he set the box down, he stretched his shoulders slightly, then returned with an appreciative look. "Thanks," he said. "I'm glad to help. My firm does a lot of community sponsorships, and I like to see things firsthand instead of signing papers from an office." Kimberly raised an eyebrow. She wasn't used to corporate donors sticking around for the unglamorous parts. "Well, we appreciate that. Most people don't show up ready to work." A chuckle slipped out of him. "You'd be surprised how often people underestimate cardboard boxes. They're heavier than they look." She laughed softly, despite herself. "Hydrate before they hand you another one," she teased, grabbing a bottle from the box and handing it to him. He accepted it with a grateful nod. "Thank you. And yes, I came straight from a meeting. I thought the suit would make me look prepared." didn't know it would make me fwet. His tie was slightly crooked now, sleeves damp near the elbows. Kimberly caught herself studying him longer than necessary. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was simply earnest. The hours drifted on with the rhythm of the event. Every time Kimberly looked up, David seemed to be helping someone, carrying chairs, offering water, engaging with elderly visitors who adored having someone willing to listen to stories from decades past. At one point, she noticed him kneeling beside a small boy who refused to get his checkup without a sticker first. David sifted through a stack of cartoon characters and held up a superhero sticker with a dramatic gasp that made the child giggle. That sight pulled a smile from Kimberly before she could stop it. David saw her watching and flashed a quick grin, almost like he was checking whether she approved. Kimberly quickly looked away, pretending to correct a stack of brochures that didn't actually need straightening. Cleanup began as the sun dipped lower, casting a warm glow through the stained glass windows. Volunteers folded tables, swept floors, and packed remaining supplies. Most sponsors had slipped out earlier, but David stayed until the final boxes were stored, chatting lightly with church members as if he were one of them. When the fellowship hall finally emptied, Kimberly stepped outside to catch a breath. The summer evening wrapped around her, warm, breezy, and filled with the faint sound of kids playing down the street. As she leaned on the railing, she heard footsteps behind her. David stood a few feet away, jacket slung over his shoulder, tie loosened, hair slightly messy. He no longer looked like a polished corporate figure. He looked real. "Beautiful sunset," he said, pausing beside her, but keeping a respectful distance. She nodded. "It is. And thank you for your help today. You didn't have to stay the whole time." He shrugged lightly. "I wanted to. It reminded me of my hometown church back in Ohio. Smaller community, but the same feeling." The mention of his roots softened something in her. "Ohio? Huh? That explains why you handled boxes instead of giving a speech." He smiled. "You would have fallen asleep if I tried to give a speech." She laughed, a warm sound she hadn't realized she'd been holding in. The moment stretched comfortably between them, broken only when some of his colleagues shouted a goodbye from the parking lot. Kimberly noticed their curious glances, some polite, others slightly confused by seeing him talk so casually with her. She pushed aside the brief discomfort it sparked. "So," David said, turning back to her, "I survived your health fair and your church coffee." She lifted an eyebrow. "The coffee wasn't that bad." He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "It was dangerously close, but I'm willing to forgive it." Her laughter came easier now. The tension she carried all day began to dissolve. Then he hesitated, hands slipping into his pockets. His next words came gentler, more uncertain. "Would you like to get dinner sometime? Or even coffee? Good coffee." His smile softened. "I'd just like see you again." Kimberly's breath caught for a moment. She hadn't expected this. Not from him. Not today. But the sincerity in his expression, the way he didn't hide his nervousness, tugged at something deep inside her. "Dinner," she repeated, keeping her tone steady despite the flutter in her chest. "I think dinner could be nice." His relief was visible. "Tomorrow?" She nodded. They exchanged numbers, fingertips brushing, a quiet spark dancing in the air between them. As she walked away, she felt compelled to glance back. He was already looking. Their eyes met again, and something unspoken flickered, something promising, something fragile, the kind of moment you don't recognize as life-changing until years later, when everything has already shifted. The following evening, the sun dipped low over Harlem, casting a warm glow across the brownstone-lined streets. Kimberly stood outside her apartment building, smoothing the front of her dress for the 10th time. She told herself she wasn't nervous. She had no reason to be, but her heartbeat suggested otherwise. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb. David stepped out, not in a full suit this time, but in a crisp button-down shirt, sleeves rolled neatly to his forearms. He held a single sunflower in his hand, bright, cheerful, unexpected. "For you," he said, his voice gentle but confident. Kimberly blinked, caught off guard. A sunflower wasn't the typical romantic gesture, but it felt sincere in a way roses never did. She accepted it with a soft smile. "Thank you. This is sweet." He rubbed the back of his neck, slightly embarrassed. "I wasn't sure what flower you liked, but this one reminded me of you." "Why?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Because it makes the room warmer," he answered, with a half grin. Kimberly felt a flutter in her chest, but she hid it as she got into the car. He opened her door, a small gesture, but a thoughtful one. The bistro in Midtown was tucked onto a quiet street, small and cozy, the kind of place where the lighting was soft and conversations hummed comfortably between tables. Their server seated them near a window, where city lights twinkled in the distance. From the moment the menus were set down, conversation flowed naturally. They talked about work, the chaos of hospital nights for her, the pressure of corporate deadlines for him. They discovered mutual love for jazz and shared frustrations about the cost of New York rent. Kimberly laughed when David admitted he once tried to cook Thanksgiving dinner alone and almost burned his apartment down. "Almost burned it down," she repeated, amused. He held up 2 fingers. "I'm being generous. The smoke alarm still doesn't trust me." Her laughter filled the space between them, warm and genuine. As plates arrived and conversations deepened, the air between them shifted, not rushed, but steady, almost inevitable. Kimberly noticed how David listened with full attention, nodding thoughtfully whenever she spoke. He wasn't distracted by his phone. He wasn't performing. He was present. When she told him about her parents, her father's years as a firefighter, her mother's dedication as a teacher, David listened like the story mattered. When he told her about losing his mother, she softened instantly. His words were quiet, careful, carrying a grief he had learned to live with, but not erase. "She loved volunteering," he said, tracing a fingertip along the rim of his glass. "That's how I knew I wanted to stay today. It felt like something she'd tell me to do." Kimberly rested her hands on the table. "I think she'd be proud of you." David smiled, small but sincere. "I hope so." Hours slipped by unnoticed. When the waiter kindly informed them The restaurant was closing. David checked his watch in disbelief. "We've been here for 3 hours. Feels like 30 minutes, Kimberly admitted. Outside, under the streetlights, the air was cooler. Soft wind brushed along her arms. She glanced at him, noticing the way he stood, just close enough to feel comfortable, but far enough to respect her space. "I had a wonderful time," he said, voice lower, steadier. "Me too," she replied. There was a quiet moment, a gentle pause filled with possibilities. David reached up slowly, brushing a stray curl behind her ear. "This okay?" Her breath caught. "Yes." He leaned in, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met softly. Not hurried, not uncertain, just right. A kiss that felt like an opening door, rather than a conclusion. Kimberly's hand grazed the side of his neck. David's hand rested lightly at her waist, as if afraid to break the moment. When they separated, she realized she was smiling without meaning to. "Good night, Kimberly," he said softly, leaning back with a warmth in his eyes that lingered. "Good night, David," she replied, unable to stop her smile from widening. He waited until she stepped inside her building before driving away, glancing back once, the same way he had the night before at the church. Their next dates unfolded easily, like chapters of familiar book they both wanted to keep reading. One afternoon, they wandered through Central Park, sharing ice cream, watching families play frisbee on the grass. Kimberly teased him for wearing shoes entirely too expensive for walking on park paths. Another evening, she took him to a jazz club in Harlem, a historic staple with dim lighting, rich brass, and velvet seats. David, one of the few white patrons, seemed nervous for a moment, but relaxed quickly as Kimberly introduced him to the couple seated beside them. Soon, he was tapping his foot along with the melody, letting the music guide him. He glanced at Kimberly often, as if the music wasn't the only thing capturing his attention. "Didn't think you had rhythm," Kimberly joked as they exited into the cool night air. "You still haven't seen me dance," he replied. She laughed, shaking her head. "Please don't tell me you're going to prove it right now." He stepped closer, taking her hand gently. "I just want to hold you a little longer." Under the street lamps, he wrapped his arms around her, swaying softly. No music played, just the hum of the city, but their steps aligned naturally. Kimberly rested her head against his chest, hearing the steady beat beneath her ear. She wasn't someone who trusted easily. The demands of medicine had trained her to be practical, disciplined, often guarded. But with David, she felt a softness she hadn't allowed in years. He made her laugh without trying. He listened, like what she said mattered. He looked at her like she was more than just another woman trying to get through life. She wasn't falling fast. She was falling steadily. And David, he fell just as hard. He watched her with quiet admiration, the way she held herself, the care in her voice when she spoke about her patients, the fire in her when she called out unfairness. He looked at her with the expression of a man who had discovered something rare. "I love being around you," he told her one night as he walked her to her door. Kimberly felt warmth bloom inside her. I feel that, too. She didn't say the word love yet, but it lingered in the air between them. As David left that night, Kimberly leaned against her apartment door, pressing a hand to her fluttering chest. She didn't want to rush. She didn't want to assume anything. But she felt something unfolding, something bigger than either of them expected, something that would soon test them in ways neither could predict. Sunday mornings in Harlem always carried a familiar warmth, choir rehearsals drifting through open windows, neighbors exchanging greetings on stoops, the aroma of home-cooked meals beginning early. Kimberly had grown up in this rhythm, and returning to Mount Zion Church with David by her side felt strangely significant. It wasn't just a date. It wasn't casual. It was her world opening to him, piece by piece. Her dress swayed lightly with each step as they approached the entrance. David walked beside her, noticeably more reserved than usual. He had worn a simple button-down shirt and slacks, trying to blend in without appearing stiff. Kimberly admired the effort. She could tell he spent extra time making sure nothing looked too formal. "You okay?" she whispered as they climbed the steps. He inhaled slowly. "I'm good. Just first impressions matter, right?" "They do," she agreed softly. "But just be yourself. They'll feel your sincerity." He nodded, though his jaw still held a quiet tension. Inside, the sanctuary glowed with warm light. Ushers greeted members with hugs, tambourines rattled near the front where children practiced, and the scent of peppermint candies floated through the air, a signature treat of the older church mothers who seemed to always have pockets full of them. Kimberly guided David down the aisle. People smiled at her, then at him, though some expressions shifted into curious glances that lingered longer than necessary. Aunt Valerie was the first to approach them. "Kimberly," she exclaimed, arms wide. She was vibrant, as always, her floral dress full of color, her voice bright enough to turn heads. After hugging Kimberly, her eyes drifted to David. "And who is this young man?" "This is David," Kimberly said calmly. "We've been spending time together." Valerie offered a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Welcome," she said, extending a hand. "Hope you're ready. Our church folks notice everything." David shook her hand gently. "Thank you for having me. It's a beautiful place." Valerie stepped back, observing him for a second, as though evaluating something only she could see. Kimberly sensed the subtle shift in the air. Not hostility, just a quiet curiosity wrapped in caution. More members came to greet them, repeating the same pattern: warm smiles toward Kimberly, polite nods toward David. Most were welcoming. Some looked unsure. A few looked surprised. He wasn't oblivious to any of it. As they found seats near the middle pew, David leaned closer. "Is everyone always this observant?" he whispered. Kimberly stifled a laugh. "This is Harlem. If you sneeze here, someone across the street will bless you." He let out a breath, relaxing a little. The service began with spirited singing, a joyful noise that made the floors vibrate. David tried clapping along, but struggled to stay on beat. Kimberly nudged him with her shoulder, smiling. I warned you, she whispered. I'm doing my best, he whispered back with a small grin. When the choir sang, Kimberly noticed him watching in quiet admiration. He wasn't faking interest. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was simply absorbing the moment, taking in the beauty of something he had never experienced before. After the benediction, they headed toward the fellowship hall, where families gathered for coffee, conversation, and homemade pastries. Kimberly's parents stood near the corner table. Her mother, dressed in a pale blue suit, looked at Kimberly first, then at David, then back at Kimberly. Her father's expression was calmer, but studying nonetheless. Mom, Dad, Kimberly began. This is David. Her mother folded her arms. Hello, David. He straightened slightly. It's very nice to meet you both. Thank you for welcoming me here. Her father nodded in acknowledgement. So you're the gentleman who helped at the health fair? Yes, sir, David answered. It was a great experience. Her mother's eyes narrowed with a hint of skepticism. You enjoyed carrying boxes? David smiled lightly. I did. It felt meaningful to contribute. Kimberly shot her mother a subtle look. Please don't push too hard. Her mother picked up her purse and said, We'll see you two at lunch, Kimberly, then walked away with her husband. David exhaled as they left. Was that okay? They're cautious, Kimberly admitted softly. They just want to protect me. From me? He asked gently. From the possibility of being hurt again, she corrected. Not from you specifically. He nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. They left the church soon after, walking down the steps into the mild afternoon warmth. Children played near the sidewalk, running between their parents' legs, their laughter echoing through the block. Kimberly paused a moment to adjust her purse strap and looked over at David. You held your own, she said with a soft smile. I felt like I was being interviewed, he joked quietly. A very intense panel. That was the easy version, she teased. His smile faded slightly as he looked ahead. Kim, can I ask you something? Of course. I know the glances weren't just because I'm new. It's because I'm different from what they expected. She didn't pretend otherwise. Yes, she said honestly, but expectations don't decide my happiness. I do. David's shoulders eased. Good. Because I really care about where this is going. Kimberly held that statement in her chest, letting it settle, letting the sincerity wash gently over her. I care too, she said, as they walked toward the corner. An elderly church member waved at them from across the street. Kimberly, baby, who is that fine young man? She called out. David froze. Kimberly burst into laughter. That's my friend, Miss Gloria. She shouted back. Mm-hmm. Gloria replied knowingly. If he treats you right, bring him back next week. Kimberly covered her face with her hands, laughing. David looked stunned. Does she always say things like that? All the time, Kimberly said, still smiling. Welcome to my world. They continued walking, the afternoon sun warming their shoulders. And as they crossed the block, Kimberly felt something settle quietly inside her. Her worlds were meeting, and though the path ahead would not be simple, she could feel something real taking root. The weeks that followed blended warmth with unease, like sunlight slipping through shifting clouds. Kimberly and David were growing closer, but beneath their easy laughter and affectionate moments, small tensions had begun to settle into the spaces between them. At the hospital, Kimberly's schedule tightened as flu season approached. Her shifts stretched longer, her sleep became lighter, and her thoughts often drifted to the next chart or emergency. She handled it with the calm discipline she had built over years of training, but the weight of responsibility pressed on her shoulders more each day. One Thursday evening, she hurried through the pediatric hallway, stethoscope swinging around her neck, hair pulled back hastily. A child she'd been monitoring took longer than expected to stabilize, and by the time she finally clocked out, she had missed the dinner she and David planned. Again, she sighed as she stepped outside into the cool night air, the city humming around her. Her phone buzzed with a message. "David, it's okay if you got held up. Want me to bring something to you?" Kimberly winced. She had told him earlier she would absolutely make this dinner. She typed back quickly. "Kimberly, I'm so sorry. Rough night. I just got out." His reply came after a few seconds. "David, I understand. Let's talk tomorrow. Get some rest." She appreciated his patience, truly, but she also felt the sting beneath it. Disappointment wasn't always loud. Sometimes it sounded like gentle understanding from someone who wished they didn't have to understand so often. Meanwhile, David's work life began shifting too. His company was pushing through a major restructuring, and the pressure around him increased sharply. Meetings stretched late. Deadlines multiplied. His supervisors pushed him toward a promotion that looked attractive on paper, but came with expectations that squeezed every corner of his time. He sat in his office late one evening, staring at a stack of reports, the glow of the desk lamp highlighting fatigue under his eyes. His colleagues had long gone home. The city skyline blinked through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind him. He should have gone home hours ago. He should have texted Kimberly. He should have eaten something. Instead, he rubbed his forehead and whispered to himself, "I can't keep missing things with her." When he finally checked his phone, he saw a message from Kimberly. "Kimberly, hope your day wasn't too overwhelming. Thinking of you." His chest tightened. He typed back, "David, thinking of you too. Sorry for being quiet today." He wanted to tell her everything, how work was suffocating, how he felt torn between ambition and peace, how he feared he wasn't good enough for the kind of life she envisioned. But vulnerability wasn't something he easily unlocked. He hesitated, then set the phone down instead of saying more. Saturday evening, they finally met for dinner after several failed attempts. Kimberly arrived at the restaurant first, choosing a booth near the back for privacy. When David walked in, she noticed immediately how tense he looked. His smile was warm, but his shoulders were tight, his eyes heavy. "You okay?" she asked as he sat down. He exhaled, long, weak. She nodded sympathetically. Mine too. Their menus stayed closed between them. Kimberly reached across the table, touching his hand. You can talk to me, you know. He lifted her hand and held it gently. I know. I just don't always know where to start. She waited, letting silence give him permission. He finally spoke. My team has been preparing for a big launch. They want me to take on more responsibility. It's a huge step, but it would take even more time from us. Kimberly absorbed his words. Do want it. I think I should, he said. Everyone seems to expect me to. Well, she said softly, what do you expect from yourself? He hesitated again, fingers curling slightly. I want a life that feels meaningful. And being with you, it feels like the first thing in a long time that actually brings me peace. Her heart warmed at his honesty. But I also don't want to disappoint my team, he added. I've worked so hard to get here. She squeezed his hand. You're allowed to choose what matters. Your career, your well-being, us. The waiter arrived, taking their orders and giving them a moment to regroup. When he left, David leaned back with a tired laugh. Your world looks exhausting, he said, and mine looks confusing. What do you mean? She asked gently. Your passion is clear. You care about people in a way that's incredible. You go through all of that chaos at the hospital and still give more when you're home. He paused. I'm starting to feel like I'm always trying to keep up. Kimberly tilted her head. David, you don't have to be perfect around me. I'm not expecting that. He nodded, but she could tell the insecurity lingered. I don't care about job titles or prestige, she continued. I care about how a person shows up. You show up, even when it's hard. He smiled weakly. I'm trying. No are. Their food arrived, giving them a natural break. They talked lightly for the rest of the meal. Movies, favorite desserts, small jokes that eased the earlier tension. But underneath the laughter, something subtle remained unsettled. When David walked her home, he held her hand with a gentleness that felt almost protective. As they stood outside her door, he turned to her. There's one more thing, he said. My company is considering an expansion on the West Coast. There's a chance they'll ask me to help lead it. Kimberly's breath paused. San Francisco? He nodded. Nothing is final, but it's been mentioned. She processed this quietly. Wasn't the distance that scared her. It was what it could mean. How do you feel about that? She asked. I don't know yet, he admitted. It could be a major opportunity, but I don't want to risk what we've built. Kimberly reached up, touching his cheek softly. Let's not panic before it's real. If the conversation comes, we'll figure it out. Together. He closed his eyes for a moment, leaning into her touch. Then he asked, barely above a whisper. "Kim, am I enough for you?" Her expression softened instantly. "David, you are more than enough, but you need to believe that too." His eyes glossed with emotion he didn't often show. He nodded, though uncertainty still lingered somewhere behind his gaze. They kissed, slow and reassuring. But as Kimberly stepped inside and closed the door, she felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. A quiet worry, not loud, not overwhelming, just a small shift, like the first sign of a storm far off in the distance. She leaned her forehead against the door and whispered to herself, "Please, let us hold on." Across the hallway, David lingered at the elevator, hands in his pockets, eyes lowered. He whispered something too. The truth he couldn't voice aloud. "I'm scared I might lose her." For a while, Kimberly and David managed to keep everything balanced, or at least they tried. Their relationship still had warmth, still had laughter, still had moments that felt like they could take on anything as long as they held on to each other. But the undercurrent of stress, uncertainty, and unspoken fears continued to deepen bit by bit. Kimberly noticed it first in the mornings. David used to text her "good luck today" before she began rounds. Lately, his messages arrived later, sometimes after she had already seen her first few patients. When she mentioned something funny that happened during her shift, his replies were shorter, not cold, not distant, but clipped enough to make her pause. She understood stress. She lived with it every day in the hospital. But something inside her whispered that this was different, that he wasn't just tired. He was weighed down by something he didn't know how to talk about. One evening, she called him after finishing a long shift. "Hey," David answered, voice quiet. "Rough day?" she asked, gently. "Yeah," he breathed. Another set of meetings. Another project added on. "My boss wants updates on the West Coast expansion again." She went still. He hadn't mentioned that in a week. "Oh," she said, keeping her tone neutral. "Is the move more likely now?" "They're pushing harder," he admitted. "They want me to consider heading the early phase, maybe even relocate temporarily." Temporarily, a word that could stretch into months, even a year. Kimberly swallowed. "What do you want?" Silence. A long one. Finally, he said, "I want you. I want this. And I want to succeed. I just feel torn." The honesty stung and comforted her at the same time. "We'll face it when it's real," she said softly. "No point deciding everything in advance." "Yeah," he replied, but something in his voice sounded defeated, like he had already rehearsed turning the opportunity down and didn't know if he could live with that choice. A week later, Kimberly asked him to join her for a Sunday stroll through Central Park. The weather was mild, a gentle afternoon breeze brushing past the treetops. Families picnicked, couples lounged on blankets, runners glided past. Kimberly held David's hand as they walked, but she could feel the subtle tension in his fingers. Not rejection, just heaviness. "Remember our first date?" she asked lightly. "You ordered iced tea and pretended you didn't mind, that the bistro was packed because the waiter liked me." David laughed softly. "I wasn't pretending. He definitely liked you. You definitely hated it. I didn't hate it, he said, nudging her shoulder. I just didn't know if you felt the same way about me yet. Kimberly smiled, but the happiness was tinged with something else. She remembered how easy things felt back then, before pressure took root, before careers twisted their schedules into knots, before the possibility of distance stretched quietly between them. She didn't say that out loud. Not yet. They reached a quiet area of the park, where the trees formed a gentle canopy overhead. Kimberly stopped and turned toward him. You've been quiet lately, she said gently. I know you're stressed, but are we okay? David's chest rose and fell with a deep breath. I'm trying to be everything at once, he admitted. A good partner to you, a strong candidate at work, someone who doesn't fall short. You're not falling short, she said, touching his arm. He looked at her, and she saw it then. The exhaustion, the weight of expectations, the fear that he wasn't enough. Kim, he whispered, I'm scared I'm going to disappoint you. She tilted her head. Why would you think that? Because you carry so much. Your work, your patience, your dreams. You deserve someone who can match that. And some days, I don't know if I can. Kimberly stepped closer and placed her palm on his chest. Matching me isn't the point. Walking beside me is. He closed his eyes, as if the reassurance soothed something raw inside him. But even as she held him, Kimberly felt an ache behind her ribs, the quiet fear she had been carrying since the day he mentioned San Francisco. She wanted to believe everything would settle, that their connection would hold firm no matter what. Yet she couldn't shake the uneasy truth that love wasn't always enough to silence ambition or fear. Sometimes people reached a point where the pressure around them pulled harder than the love within them. That week, the tension between them started showing in small, unexpected ways. Kimberly invited him over for dinner after her shift, but he arrived late, not terribly late, just enough that the food had begun to cool and she had started eating without him. Sorry, he said, dropping his jacket on the chair. Meeting ran longer. It's all right, she replied, but the disappointment slipped into her voice before she could mask it. David froze for a moment, reading her expression. Kim, I'm doing my best. I know you are, she said quickly. I didn't mean to. It feels like I'm failing, he interrupted. Every time I try to balance everything, one part slips. That's not fair. I'm not saying it's your fault. I'm saying it's me. I'm stretched thin. Kimberly softened. Then let's talk about it, instead of letting it build up. He nodded but said nothing more, and the rest of dinner passed with polite conversation, the warmth between them clouded by a tension neither knew how to unravel without making the other feel blamed. 2 days later, they sat together on her sofa, watching a movie. Kimberly rested her head on his shoulder, but David wasn't fully present. His phone buzzed multiple times with work notifications. He kept glancing at it, jaw tight. Finally, Kimberly reached over and gently took his hand. Can we turn it off? Just for tonight? David hesitated, then powered the phone off and placed it face down. He turned to her and kissed her temple, a quiet apology in the gesture. "You're right," he whispered. "I need this. I need you." They relaxed into each other, but under the comfort, unresolved feelings hovered. His fear of failing, her fear of losing him, their shared confusion over how to move forward, while their worlds demanded so much from them. The night before everything changed, they had a quiet conversation on her balcony. The city glowed below them, lights flickering like faraway signals they could barely interpret. "Do you ever feel like life is shifting faster than we can catch up?" David asked suddenly. Kimberly nodded. Day. "Does that scare you?" he asked. "Yes," she admitted, "but it also means we're growing. Change isn't always bad." He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Admiration, longing, and maybe a trace of something like grief. "What scares me," he said softly, "is losing the good things while I'm trying to chase the right things." Kimberly leaned her head against his shoulder. "You won't lose me," she murmured. But a small voice inside her whispered, "Not unless the weight becomes too much. Not unless he reaches a point where he can no longer hold everything at once." David wrapped his arm around her and kissed the top of her head. She closed her eyes, holding on to him just a little tighter. Neither of them knew it yet, but the cracks forming in these quiet nights would soon widen into a breaking point that changed both of their lives forever. Sunday morning sunlight washed across Harlem, catching the stained glass windows of Mount Zion Church in warm color as families climbed the steps dressed in their Sunday best. The choir was already rehearsing inside, their harmonies drifting through the open doors and filling the block with familiar comfort. Kimberly stood beside David at the entrance, smoothing her dress with a nervous hand. She had never brought a man here before, not one she cared about in this way. For years, this place was her refuge, her compass, her community. Today, she was sharing it with someone from a world completely different from hers. David tugged lightly at the collar of his shirt. "Be honest," he whispered. "Do I look like I'm about to embarrass you?" Kimberly hid a smile. "You look fine. Just breathe." "I'm trying," he murmured, eyes scanning the lively crowd gathering outside. Seniors greeting each other with hugs, teenagers sharing earbuds, little kids chasing one another along the steps. It was a swirl of familiarity to Kimberly and a wave of unfamiliarity to David. She slipped her hand into his. "They'll like you. They're your people," he said softly. "That means something." Before she could respond, the doors swung open, and one of the ushers, an older woman with a smile as warm as the sun, beckoned them inside. "Come on in, baby. Service is starting soon." David stepped through the entrance, taking in everything at once: the choir robes, the rhythmic tapping of feet, the joyful noise of a worship style he had seen only once before, when he came here with Kimberly months ago, long before any talk of careers, pressure, or future uncertainties. Kimberly greeted familiar faces on their way to a pew. A few murmured hello to David, curiosity flickering across their expressions. One man gave him a quick once-over but nodded politely. Kimberly caught the reaction, but didn't cling to it. She had expected a mixture of warmth and guarded assessment. After all, in this community, people protect their own. The choir swelled into the opening hymn. David shifted awkwardly at first, trying to follow along, but soon relaxed as Kimberly guided him through the rhythm, clapping on the right beat, swaying gently. When she closed her eyes to sing, he watched her face, the peace that washed over her, the connection she had to this place. This part of her life had nothing to do with hospitals, rounds, or medical charts. This was the Kimberly shaped by parents who taught her to give back, by a community that raised her, by a faith that gave her strength long before he knew her. And he admired her even more for it. After the sermon, a message about patience, sacrifice, and trust, Kimberly led David to the fellowship hall where her parents were waiting. Doreen greeted them first. "Kimmy?" she exclaimed, enveloping her daughter in a hug before turning to David. "And this must be the famous David." David straightened, offering a respectful nod. "Yes, ma'am. It's a pleasure to meet you." "Oh, good manners," she said, approvingly. "We like that." Walter was next, shaking David's hand with a firm grip. "You the man taking my daughter to all those fancy midtown spots?" David chuckled nervously. "Guilty." "Uh-huh," Walter said, eyes narrowing just slightly before warming again. "Welcome." And, of course, stepping in right on cue with a dramatic flip of her scarf, Aunt Valerie. "Well, well, well," she announced, folding her arms. "Let me get a good look at him." She circled David once, humming to herself. Tall, neat. Looks like he drinks expensive coffee. "Yup, this is him. The boyfriend." Kimberly groaned. "Auntie, please." "Hush. I'm doing my job," she said, still inspecting David. "Now, young man, what exactly are your intentions with Kimmy?" David blinked twice. Kimberly covered her face, but he answered, steady but warm. "I care about her very much, and I'm honored to be here." Aunt Valerie's eyebrow rose. "Honored?" She leaned toward Kimberly and stage whispered, "I like him. For now." Kimberly swatted lightly at her arm. "Stop instigating," Walter chuckled as he guided everyone inside for dinner. "Don't mind her. Valerie been like that since she learned to talk." At the table, food filled every inch: baked chicken, mac and cheese, sweet potatoes, green beans seasoned just right. The kind of meal that soothed the soul. David waited until everyone prayed before taking a bite. His eyes widened. "This is incredible." "Oh, he can stay," Doreen said proudly. "No one leaves this house hungry." Conversation flowed easily at first. Stories about Kimberly's childhood, funny moments from church, Walter teasing David about sports. But as the meal went on, the underlying cultural differences surfaced, not harshly, but undeniably. A cousin asked David about his job, and when he mentioned the string of corporate art events he attended, Aunt Valerie clicked her tongue. "I bet they look at Kimberly crazy at those things," she said pointedly. Kimberly stiffened slightly. David noticed immediately. "She handles herself better than anyone there," he said calmly. "But yes, sometimes people are ignorant." Valerie said. I know how some folks can get when they see a black woman shining in a room she wasn't expected to be in." Kimberly appreciated her aunt's defense, but she shot her a look as if to say, "Not today, please." David reached under the table and squeezed her hand. Later, when they stepped outside for fresh air before dessert, Kimberly let the moment settle between them. "You okay?" he asked quietly. She nodded, but didn't hide her truth. "It's just, sometimes it's exhausting having to prove I belong, even in places where I've earned it." David exhaled slowly. "I hate that you go through that. And I hate that I can't always stop it. You being aware means something," she said gently. "Awareness is a start." He looked her in the eyes, sincerity shining. "I'm not going anywhere. Even if the world doubts us, I won't." Kimberly felt the truth in his voice, and her chest warmed. Still, deep inside, she knew the hard part wasn't over. Their worlds didn't blend naturally. They required patience, understanding, and choices that neither of them had fully faced yet. As they returned to the house, she wondered quietly, would you stay with someone if their world doubted you? A question her viewers would soon reflect on as well. The week after dinner with her family, the atmosphere around Kimberly and David shifted in ways that were easy to overlook at first. Nothing explosive, nothing dramatic, just small changes, subtle enough to dismiss, yet persistent enough to unsettle her. David's schedule grew tighter than she'd ever seen it. He woke earlier, slept later, consumed more coffee than meals. His phone buzzed constantly, even on days he promised to unplug. Kimberly understood pressure. She lived inside it every day at the hospital. But something different was happening to him. Something sharper. Something that gnawed at him from the inside. One Wednesday evening, Kimberly prepared a simple dinner: roasted chicken, seasoned vegetables, and rice. She had the table set for two, a soft playlist humming in the background. She wanted tonight to feel normal, grounding, something to remind them both that love still lived here, no matter how chaotic life became. 7 o'clock passed. Then 8. By 8:30, she sat alone at the table, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Every time footsteps echoed outside her apartment, her heart lifted, then fell again when they continued past her door. She checked her phone till nothing. Her stomach tightened, not because she feared betrayal, but because the silence reminded her of a chapter she had spent years healing from, being left to carry worry alone while someone she loved disappeared into their own storm. Finally, at a little past 9, her phone lit up. "David, I'm so sorry. Still at the office. My phone died. I'll call as soon as I can." The message was brief but genuine. Kimberly closed her eyes and took a slow breath. She wasn't angry about the missed dinner. She was hurt by the growing pattern. Him bearing everything alone while she stood on the outside waiting for a door to open. When he arrived at her place close to 10, looking drained and heavy-eyed, she met him at the door. He leaned in to kiss her cheek, but she hesitated a beat too long. His expression shifted. Confusion, then guilt. "Kim, I'm really sorry. Today was..." "I know," she said, softly. Work, stress, meetings. I get it. But you could have found a way to reach me earlier. He let out a breath, rubbing his forehead. I know. You're right. I should have. Things spiraled, and I just didn't manage it well. She didn't comment on the choice of word. She simply stepped aside to let him in. He sank onto her couch, shoulders slumped. The partners called an emergency review. They want updates on the expansion plan again. More projections, more revisions. It's never enough. Kimberly sat beside him. You don't have to carry all of that a day. He looked at her, exhaustion in his eyes. Oh, I don't want to burden you. You won't, she replied, voice steady. You're not a weight. You're someone I care about. Sharing isn't burdening. It's connection. Those words softened something in him. He reached for her hand and held it tightly, as if anchoring himself. I feel like I'm standing at the edge of something huge, he admitted, and the pressure is getting heavier every day. I'm trying to prove I can handle this promotion, but I'm scared that if I choose it, I'll lose the very thing I love most. Kimberly blinked, heart squeezing. You mean us? Yes, he whispered. You. She rested her head on his shoulder, wishing her presence alone could melt the tension gripping him. But she felt something, too. Something she didn't want to say aloud. A quiet fear, a whisper that tugged at her. Every time he mentioned the West Coast, distance had taken something from her once before. Not with him, but the wound from that past still lived inside her. She had learned to move forward, to trust again, to love again. But the scar sometimes pulsed when she sensed someone drifting. She refused to project her past onto him, but she also couldn't deny the tremors building beneath the surface. 2 days later, David invited her to an art fundraising event his company co-sponsored. Kimberly agreed, wanting to be at his side, not just in the safe spaces of her life, but in the world he operated in as well. The gallery was sleek and modern, the kind of place where the hum of quiet conversations blended with the soft clink of wine glasses. Tall ceilings, abstract pieces lining the walls, and people dressed in tailored suits discussing investments with an air of effortless confidence. When they walked in together, David's colleagues greeted him warmly, but their eyes slid curiously toward Kimberly. The glances weren't overt, nothing aggressive or blatantly unwelcoming. But Kimberly had lived long enough to recognize when someone was trying to figure out why she was there. One woman approached with a courteous smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. David, I didn't realize you were bringing someone tonight. Of course, he said smoothly, placing a hand on Kimberly's back. This is Kimberly. Oh, the colleague replied, her gaze flicking over Kimberly's simple, elegant dress. Lovely to meet you. And what do you do? I'm a physician, Kimberly answered, calm and polite. Ah, the woman's eyebrows lifted slightly, impressed, yet still assessing. How interesting. Kimberly caught the micro-expression before the woman quickly masked it. David caught it, too. His jaw tightened. He wrapped his arm more securely around Kimberly, guiding her away with a quiet, "We don't need to entertain that energy." Kimberly smiled a little at his protectiveness, but inside, she felt something sting. Not because of the woman, because David had hesitated at first, as if unsure how to place her in his world. Later, as they moved to a quieter corner of the gallery, Kimberly exhaled slowly. I know what that look meant. You know. David nodded. I hated it. You don't have to shield me, she said. I've dealt with worse. I just want to know if you're comfortable standing beside me in spaces like this. I am, he said immediately. Too quickly. Then he softened. I want to be. I just don't always know if I'm doing it right. She touched his wrist gently. Just be present. That's all I need. He nodded, and for a moment, the world felt steady between them. But steadiness didn't last. The firm sent him a revised proposal for the San Francisco branch, this time with clearer expectations, projected milestones, and a recommended relocation timeline. When he read the document at her dining table one evening, Kimberly saw something shift in his expression. Not excitement, not relief, fear. He pushed the laptop back and leaned into his chair. This real now. Kimberly studied him. How do you feel about it? I don't know, he said. Part of me wants it. Part of me doesn't. I feel like choosing either direction means sacrificing something huge. She swallowed. Which sacrifice hurts more? He looked at her with a conflicted ache in his eyes. Both. That night when he held her close, his embrace felt different, tighter, almost desperate, as if he feared losing her in the uncertainty ahead. Kimberly rested her forehead against his. We'll face this together. We'll talk through every possibility. He nodded, but the unease remained in his eyes, and in her chest, a quiet ache began to form, one she didn't yet have a name for. But he would soon, because the pressure building in David's life and the unspoken fears building in hers were about to collide in a way neither of them expected. If this part meets your expectations. The bathroom mirror caught the faint tremble in Kimberly's hand as she held the small white stick. The soft hum of the bathroom fan filled the silence, but her heartbeat drowned it out. She hadn't meant to take the test tonight. She planned to wait. Tomorrow morning. Maybe even the next day. But something deep in her chest insisted she needed the truth now. She stared at the result window, waiting for the lines to settle. Her vision blurred, then sharpened. 2 lines. 2 solid, undeniable lines. Her breath hitched, and she pressed a hand to her mouth, tears gathering instantly. Not from fear, not from regret, but from an overwhelming rush of emotion she wasn't prepared for. Life, a life inside her, a part of her, part of, too. She sank onto the closed toilet lid, the test trembling in her grip. Her scrubs still smelled faintly of antiseptic and baby lotion from her shift, a scent that now felt almost poetic in the strangest way. The moment felt fragile, sacred, overwhelming. She thought about the child who would inherit her strength, her compassion, perhaps David's determination. A child who could become a bridge between their worlds. She whispered to the empty room, little one. You're real. Her tears fell freely now, tears of wonder, fear, love, and hope tangled together. She imagined telling David the way his face would change, the way his hands might tremble, the way hers did now. She pictured him kneeling, embracing her, whispering, "We're in this together." But a small, quiet fear whispered beneath the emotion. The stress, the silence, the distance he'd been carrying lately. Would this bring him closer or push him further away? Kimberly swallowed hard. She refused to let fear tell this story. She set the test gently on the counter, stood, wiped her eyes, and steadied her breath. She wanted to tell him in person, face to face, with hope, not heaviness. She prepared for him thoughtfully. She changed out of her scrubs and into a soft sweater dress he always said made her look peaceful. She lit a single candle on the coffee table, letting its warm glow soften the edges of the room. She brewed tea because she knew he'd come in tired. Well, David texted, "On my way. Traffic bad. Be there soon." Her heart fluttered with a mix of anticipation and nerves. She sat on the couch, one hand resting instinctively on her stomach. When the knock finally came, she inhaled deeply and went to open the door. David stepped inside, shoulders tight, tie loosened, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. His phone buzzed in his hand. Another work message, another demand pulling at him. He silenced it quickly, too quickly, as if he didn't want her to see how constantly the outside world reached for him. "Hey," he said softly, leaning in to kiss her cheek. "You look calm, and you look tired," she replied gently. "Long day," he admitted. "Every direction feels like pressure." She touched his arm. "Then let's sit. There's something important I want to talk to you about." He tensed, just slightly, barely noticeable, but she felt the shift. "Is everything okay?" he asked. Kimberly nodded, guiding him to the couch. "It's something big, but good, really good." He sat, resting his elbows on his knees, hands clasped. She sat facing him, her heart racing. "David," she began softly, "I'm pregnant." Silence fell with a weight neither of them could lift. David's eyes widened. His lips parted, but no sound came. His fingers loosened, then curled into fists, then loosened again. He blinked twice, as if trying to clear his vision. "Pregnant?" he repeated, voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," she said. "I found out tonight. I wanted to tell you in person." He leaned back slowly, breath shaky. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say everything right now," she assured him. "Just here with me." But his face changed. Not with anger, not with rejection, with something far more painful. Fear deep enough to hollow his expression. "Kim," he whispered, "I'm not ready for this." Her stomach dropped. "We can figure it out together." "No," he interrupted, standing abruptly and pacing toward the window. You don't understand. I'm barely keeping my life together as it is. I'm drowning at work. I'm failing you. I'm not even sure where I'm supposed to live in 6 months." She rose slowly. "David, breathe. Sit with me. We can talk through it." "No!" His voice cracked. Not loud, but sharp. "You deserve stability. A man who's sure of himself. Someone who knows what he wants. I'm all over the place." "You're human," she said softly. "That's all you are. And this baby is ours. We created a life. I didn't ask for this." He blurted. Kimberly froze. Those words sliced through the air like cold metal. David's face contorted as soon as they left his mouth. "Kim, I mean..." She steadied her breath, fighting the tremble in her voice. "You think I planned this? You think I forced this on you?" "No," he said quickly. "No, that's not what I meant. I'm just terrified. I can't be a father right now. I can't even be the partner you need." "David," she whispered, tears rising. "Look at me." He did, and she saw everything. His fear, his confusion, the weight he carried, the battle between his love for her and the pressure crushing him from all sides. "Do you love me?" she asked, gently. "More than anything," he said instantly. "Then stay," she pleaded. "Stay, and we'll figure this out." His shoulders caved. He looked broken, torn, lost. "I can't. If I stay, I'll fail you and the baby. If I go, maybe you'll find someone better. Someone who isn't consumed by fear." "Don't say that," she cried. "We can build something real. We already have." But then her heart plummeted as he whispered, "I'm not strong enough for this." And for the first time, Kimberly saw that he believed it, truly believed it. She stepped toward him. "David, don't walk away. Please, don't do this." He backed up, shaking his head as tears filled his eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I can't stay." "David." But he was already moving toward the door, grabbing his jacket with trembling hands. When he opened the door, a rush of cold night air swept into the room, chilling her skin instantly. He looked back once, just once. "I love you," he whispered, "but I'm who need." Then he tapped out. The door closed behind him with a soft click that echoed through her entire body. Kimberly's knees buckled, and she sank to the floor, her hand covering her mouth as silent sobs shook her. The candle on the table flickered weakly, its flame trembling as if mourning with her. Minutes, or maybe hours, passed before she noticed the envelope on the kitchen counter. Her name written in David's handwriting. Her heart shattered even before she opened it. Inside was his apology. 2 pages of fear, uncertainty, regret. Words that tried to explain the very thing she could never understand. How love could be so deep and still fail under pressure. As she read the final line, her chest caved. "Maybe one day you'll forgive me." The letter slipped from her hands, fluttering onto the floor as she curled into herself, crying until her breath broke. Her world didn't end that night. But something inside her did. Something she would spend years rebuilding. For herself, for her heart, and for the child growing quietly within her. The child who would one day look just like the man who walked away. The days after David walked out felt heavier than anything Kimberly had ever carried. Not the 12-hour shifts, not the emotional toll of holding frightened parents in the ER, not the long nights studying during residency. Nothing compared to waking each morning with the reality pressing against her ribs. She was lone, and she was pregnant. The morning sickness started early, not sharp or violent at first, just a queasy wave that rolled through her body the moment she opened her eyes. She would sit on the edge of her bed, hand on her stomach, breathing through the nausea as sunlight crept through her curtains. "You're okay," she whispered to herself. "We're okay." Some mornings, she said it with conviction. Other mornings, she struggled to believe her own words. Her parents became her quiet foundation. They didn't push. They didn't pry. They simply showed up. Her mother filled her fridge with soups and herbal teas. Her father fixed the loose hinge on her bathroom cabinet and replaced the dead light bulbs without her asking. Aunt Valerie checked in every evening with her dramatic flair, offering unsolicited advice and gentle humor. But none of them ever said his name. No one mentioned the man who had left her with a life growing inside her. Kimberly was grateful for that. Yet, in the quiet moments, David's absence echoed everywhere. The empty space beside her in bed, the cold spot on the couch where he used to rest his arm around her, the silence when she reached for her phone and remembered she had no one to share the baby's first flutters with. Sometimes she replayed his departure over and over, the trembling apology, the cracked voice, the way he looked back one last time before stepping into the night. The hurt was sharp at first, then dull, then sharp again, like a wound that refused to close. But despite the pain, she moved. She kept going for the baby. At her first prenatal appointment, she sat in the waiting room between a mother of 4 and a young couple clutching hands. She glanced down at her own hands, one resting protectively on her stomach, the other curled around her purse strap. She felt exposed, vulnerable, yet fiercely determined. When the doctor performed the ultrasound, Kimberly's heart stuttered. There, on the screen, a tiny flicker pulsed rhythmically. A heartbeat. Her breath broke, a tear slipping down her cheek before she could stop it. "That's your baby?" the doctor said softly. Kimberly nodded, unable to speak. She imagined David beside her, how his eyes would widen, how he might reach for her hand, how he would have whispered her name the way he used to in quiet moments. But then the memory of his fear surged back. He didn't choose this. He didn't choose her. He didn't choose them. And she refused to let his absence define the child growing inside her. By her second trimester, Kimberly resumed work at the clinic part-time. Financially, she needed to think ahead. She had savings, yes, but daycare, baby supplies, maternity leave coverage, everything felt like a tidal wave. Still, she showed up with grace. During her lunch breaks, she researched baby cribs on her phone. During bus rides home, she rubbed her belly and whispered, "You're safe. I've got you." At night, she folded small clothes her mother had bought. Tiny onesies, socks barely big enough to cover her thumb. One evening, after a long clinic shift, Kimberly shuffled into her apartment. Exhausted, she kicked off her shoes and collapsed onto the couch. Her hand drifted to her stomach. "You're getting bigger," she murmured, with a tired smile. Then, a soft flutter. A gentle tap from the inside met her palm. She gasped. Her baby's first movement. A small, miraculous flutter. "Hi, little one," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "I felt you." It wasn't just a sensation. It was a reminder. She wasn't alone. Nah, anymore. And yet, memories of David arrived uninvited. His laugh, his gentle kiss on her forehead, his hand brushing her curls behind her ear, his voice whispering he loved her under her balcony lights. But memories shifted painfully into the image of him leaving, the letter he left behind, the emptiness in his eyes when he said he wasn't enough. The baby kicked again, grounding her back into the present. As her belly grew, so did the support from her community. Church members dropped off meals. Her father drove her to appointments whenever he could. Her mother accompanied her to baby stores, offering wisdom and patience. One Sunday afternoon, after service, the church gathered around her to pray. Warm hands rested on her shoulders, her back, her arms. Voices lifted around her, speaking strength into her spirit. "You are not doing this alone," Miss Gloria said firmly. Kimberly nodded, emotion swelling in her throat. But that night, when she lay in bed, her mind drifted to the quiet moments she wished she could share with David. She imagined placing his hand on her belly. She imagined seeing his expression when the baby kicked. She imagined the wonder on his face during the ultrasound. She imagined his tears of joy at the birth. But imagination was not reality. Reality was her rising from bed with backaches. Reality was her budgeting expenses. Reality was her rubbing her swollen ankles alone. Reality was crying silently into her pillow. Some nights, when the fear became too heavy, yet through every ache, every anxiety, every sleepless night, she endured. Not because she wasn't hurting, but because her love for the child growing inside her was stronger than any heartbreak. The birth came on a rainy evening in late spring. The contractions hit hard and fast, each one gripping her body like a wave. She clutched her mother's arm as they rushed into New York Presbyterian Hospital. Nurses guided her into a delivery room. Machines beeped softly. The sharp scent of antiseptic filled the air. Her mind raced between fear and determination. "You're doing great," her mother whispered, smoothing her curls. "Breathe, baby. Just breathe." Hours passed in painful, relentless waves. And then, with one final push and a cry torn from her chest, a baby girl entered the world. Kimberly collapsed back against the pillows, tears streaking down her face as her daughter's first cries filled the room. Strong, fierce, beautiful. When the nurse placed the tiny bundle on her chest, Kimberly felt her entire soul rearrange. The baby blinked up at her with dark, curious eyes. Eyes that were hers, but in their shape, the curve, the softness. Kimberly saw something unmistakable. David, a sharp pain cut through her heart, not because she resented it, but because love and loss collided in that single moment. Her daughter's eyes, his eyes, looked at her as if saying, "I'm here. I'm yours." Kimberly kissed her baby's forehead, letting tears fall freely. "Welcome to the world, my love," she whispered. "I'm your mother, and I promise I will protect you with everything in me." She held her daughter close, breathing in her newborn scent, letting her tiny heartbeat soothe every cracked part of her spirit. David's absence was a wound, but this child, this blessing, became the force that would heal it. Little did Kimberly know, across the country, David was unraveling in ways he never expected, his success rising, his soul sinking, and his path unknowingly curving back toward the city where she held the child who looked like him. The first weeks after bringing Laura home were a blur of sleepless nights, quiet triumphs, and raw moments that stretched Kimberly in ways medicine never prepared her for. She had delivered babies before. She had soothed anxious mothers and reassured families in crisis. But holding her own child, protecting her, learning her rhythms, this was a different world entirely. The tiny Brooklyn apartment, which once felt too quiet, now pulsed with new life. Soft whimpers at dawn, the rustle of blankets, the gentle hum of lullabies Kimberly whispered into the dimly lit room. Some nights she cried softly while nursing, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming tenderness of motherhood. Laura's eyes, those familiar, soft brown eyes, watched her with a trust that melted everything else away. "Hi, Angel," Kimberly whispered during one early morning feeding. "It's you and me. We're doing this together." Laura blinked sleepily, as if accepting the promise. During maternity leave, Kimberly often walked through the neighborhood with Laura snuggled against her chest in a wrap. The streets buzzed with vendors selling fruit on corners, kids riding scooters along sidewalks, older men arguing playfully outside barbershops, and brownstone stoops lined with neighbors sharing the day's gossip. People always paused to admire Laura. "She's beautiful," strangers would say. Kimberly always smiled, responding softly, "Thank you." They didn't know the story behind those eyes. They didn't know the ache that still tightened in Kimberly's chest some nights. But she did, and she learned to hold that ache without letting it define her. Returning to work at the clinic was both a relief and a challenge. She packed Laura's bag the night before, bottles meticulously labeled, tiny clothes folded neatly, a note for her mother detailing nap times and feeding cues. Her first morning back, Kimberly stood outside the clinic doors, adjusting her badge with trembling fingers. She felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle over her, but now it came paired with a different urgency. She wasn't just working for career progression anymore. She was working for Laura's future. Inside, her coworkers greeted her with warm hugs and surprised smiles. "You look amazing, Kim. We missed you." "How's the little one. Kimberly laughed softly. She's perfect and exhausting. But once she stepped into her exam room, everything clicked. Her hands knew what to do. Her voice found its rhythm again. Her empathy deepened, because now she understood firsthand the fierce love that lived in every worried parent's eyes. During her lunch breaks, she FaceTimed her mother to check on Laura. Seeing her daughter in soft pajamas, kicking tiny feet, soothed the fatigue from her body. She smiled today, her mother announced one afternoon. Kimberly pressed a hand to her heart. I'll be home soon. Don't let her grow up too fast. Church became her anchor once more. Laura was dedicated at Mount Zion, wrapped in a white cotton dress, her hair brushed gently into soft curls. The congregation circled around them as the pastor prayed for strength, protection, and purpose over her life. Miss Gloria cried louder than anyone. Aunt Valerie recorded the entire ceremony on her old phone, narrating dramatically. Her father held Laura afterward and whispered, "You're our blessing." Kimberly watched the scene with quiet gratitude. Her world had fractured once, but somehow, through faith and community, the pieces had formed something new, something stronger. The months passed, filled with small milestones that rewrote Kimberly's entire sense of purpose. Laura's first laugh, bright, unexpected, bursting through the room like sunshine. Her first roll onto her stomach. Her first attempt at crawling, inching forward with determined little grunts. Each moment was a victory. And each night, when the apartment fell quiet, Kimberly sometimes found herself sitting on the edge of the bed holding one of Laura's onesies, feeling memories of David wash through her. Not with longing, not with regret, but with a deep ache for what could have been, and a growing pride in what she was becoming without him. By the time Laura turned one, Kimberly had mastered a balance she never imagined she'd achieve. Mornings included diapers, bottles, and rushed commutes. Afternoons were filled with checkups, pediatric cases, and consultations. Evenings were for laughter, baths, tiny socks, and bedtime stories whispered into a dim nursery. There were hard days, days when she felt overwhelmed, stretched thin, exhausted beyond tears. But even on those days, when she looked into Laura's eyes, she found enough strength to keep going. One night, as Laura slept sprawled across her crib like a tiny starfish, Kimberly sat nearby, folding clothes. The room was warm, filled with the soft glow of a nightlight, shaped like a moon. She paused, watching her daughter breathe peacefully. "This is worth everything," she whispered. Laura stirred, turning her head slightly, lips puckering as if dreaming. Kimberly smiled. It amazed her how such a small person could fill so much space in her heart. When Laura turned 2, her personality bloomed. She loved shaking her curls, babbling entire stories only she understood, toddling through the apartment with joyful determination. She danced whenever music played, even commercials. She laughed when Kimberly did silly voices. She ran to the front door every evening when her mother came home from the clinic, shouting, "Mama!" One summer afternoon, Kimberly brought Laura to a small park in Brooklyn. Children chased bubbles near the fountain. Vendors sold shaved ice. Mothers chatted on benches, and church groups practiced songs under shady trees. Laura toddled toward the playground, pointing at the swings. "Mama!" "Push." Kimberly lifted her onto the swing and nudged it gently. Laura squealed, legs kicking the air. In that moment, a wave of gratitude hit Kimberly so powerfully she almost cried. She had feared this life would break her. Instead, it built her. She became more grounded, more confident, more resilient. Her joy was no longer fragile. It was earned. And though she still carried moments where her heart wondered about David, she no longer felt defined by his leaving. She had built a life, a home, a future, not in spite of her pain, but through it. Late one night, after Laura fell asleep, Kimberly stood on the balcony of her apartment, watching the distant skyline glow. Brooklyn hummed below her, cars passing, music drifting through open windows, people talking on stoops. She wrapped her sweater tighter around her and closed her eyes. For the first time in a long time, she felt peaceful. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She didn't know if David would ever return. She didn't know what the next few years would look like. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She had risen from a heartbreak that once threatened to shatter her. She had become a mother, a strong, present, loving mother, and had built a life where her daughter thrived. As she turned to go inside, she whispered to herself, "We're going to be okay, Laura. We're more than okay." And she believed it. Across the country, however, a man who once walked away was beginning to crumble under the weight of his own choices, but Kimberly had no idea her story was about to collide with his again. San Francisco was everything David once believed he wanted. Tall glass buildings, buzzing innovation, endless opportunity. A city that moved fast, worked harder, and rewarded ambition with status and income he had only dreamed of in New York. But the first night he moved into his luxury high-rise, overlooking the glowing bay, he realized something unsettling. Silence followed him here, and silence was louder than any city noise. He stood in the middle of his furnished apartment, surrounded by expensive pieces chosen by a design team, and felt a hollow ache settle in his chest. It should have felt like achievement, a milestone, a reward. Instead, it felt like a punishment. He knew why. He had left behind the one person whose presence made him feel grounded. He had walked away from a woman who believed in him, even when he doubted himself. He had abandoned the child she now carried, a child he tried not to think about because the guilt threatened to swallow him whole. Work consumed him instantly. Meetings started before sunrise. Investors challenged him. Supervisors praised his analytical mind, while ignoring the exhaustion etched across his face. Deadlines blurred together. He went through the motions with the efficiency of someone who no longer knew how to be present in his own life. But whenever he returned home, whether it was 7 in the evening or midnight, the emptiness hit him hard. His apartment smelled of nothing. No perfume, no shared meals, no warmth, just polished surfaces and quiet rooms. Sometimes he poured himself a drink and stood at the window, staring at the dark water, wondering if Kimberly was still awake across the country, or if she hated him now. He couldn't blame her if she did. 2 months into his relocation, the nightmares began. He dreamed of Kimberly standing in her doorway, tears streaming down her face as he walked away. He dreamed of hearing a baby cry, soft at first, then louder, until it shook him awake. He dreamed he was holding a child with his eyes, only for the child to dissolve into mist before he could speak. He woke drenched in sweat, chest tight, breathing shallow. One morning, after a particularly brutal dream, he stared at himself in the bathroom mirror. He barely recognized the man, looking back, unshaven, eyes tired. A man who claimed he wasn't ready to be a father, yet missed the child he'd never met. That day, he made a decision. He walked into a therapy office overlooking Market Street, sat across from a middle-aged therapist with calm eyes, and said the words that tasted like rust on his tongue. I walked away from the woman I love, and from a baby I didn't believe I deserved. The therapist didn't judge him. She simply asked, "Why didn't you believe you deserved them?" The question cracked something open in him. He spoke about the expectations that crushed him, the fear of failure he never admitted aloud, the belief that love demanded perfection, and he was anything but perfect. He confessed the guilt that clung to him every night, the fear that Kimberly would raise a child who thought their father didn't want them. He cried for the first time in years, not loudly, not dramatically, just soft, quiet tears that carried the weight of everything he buried. His therapist handed him a tissue. "Guilt tells us what we lost," she said gently, "but responsibility tells us what we can still repair." Those words stayed with him for months. Despite therapy, David attempted to rebuild his social life. He went on a few dates, brief, surface-level dinners recommended by well-meaning coworkers. One woman laughed at his jokes, but he couldn't focus on her words. Another reached for his hand, and he felt nothing. A third asked about his past relationships, and he found himself unable to speak without feeling a surge of guilt. He ended every date early because every smile he saw reminded him of Kimberly's smile. Every voice reminded him of her softness. Every moment reminded him of what he left behind, and he hated himself for it. Financially, David flourished. Promotions came quickly. His salary skyrocketed. He became the kind of man people admired from a distance. Successful, refined, living in a penthouse with a view of the water. But at night, sitting at his expensive dining table, eating takeout alone, the success tasted like ash. There was no Kimberly leaning over the counter, tasting his cooking and teasing him. No soft hum of her laugh filling the apartment. No shared comfort after long days. His life was full on paper and empty in truth. Loneliness wrapped itself around him like a cold blanket. Sometimes, late at night, when he couldn't sleep, David opened his laptop and typed her name into the search bar. Kimberly Ree. He found medical articles she contributed to. A charity event photo where she stood smiling beside colleagues. No pictures of her personal life. No trace of a baby, but he still imagined her with one. He imagined the nursery. He imagined her rocking a child that looked like him. He imagined her whispering comforting words during late-night feedings. And it broke him in ways he never said out loud. One night, while scrolling through old messages between them, he paused at a photo she once sent him, a simple picture of her smiling in scrubs after a long shift. It hit him so hard, he had to set the phone down. He whispered into the quiet room, "I'm sorry, Kim. I'm so sorry." The apology went nowhere, yet it carried the sincerity he hadn't been able to express the night he left. Months turned into a year. Then another. San Francisco shaped him, but it did not save him. His therapist encouraged him to confront what he avoided. "You can't outrun regret forever," she said during one session. "It's waiting for you to acknowledge it. Truly acknowledge it." David clenched his jaw. "I don't know how." "Start by asking yourself the real question," she replied. "What do you fear more? Returning and facing what you left behind, or staying here knowing you lost the chance to make things right?" He stared at her, heart pounding, because he knew the answer. He feared losing Kimberly forever. He feared losing the child even more. He feared Laura growing up, believing her father wanted nothing to do with her. He feared being the broken link in a life he helped create. The decision came quietly. On a night when fog rolled across the bay and the moonlight shimmered faintly through his window, David sat alone at the kitchen island, staring at a cold cup of coffee. He didn't cry. He didn't panic. He didn't rush. He simply knew he had to go back. He had to face Kimberly. He had to face the child, whether she remembered him or not. He had to face the pain he caused. He had to take responsibility. He stood, grabbed his coat, and walked out onto the balcony. The city lights flickered below him, but they didn't impress him anymore. With a steady breath, he whispered the truth aloud. "I'm going home." He had no idea what waiting for him. Forgiveness? Rejection? Silence? Oh, a second chance he didn't deserve. But he knew one thing. Running had cost him too much. As he packed a suitcase later that night, his hands trembled, not with fear, but with resolve. He wasn't the same man who left. He wasn't the man who stood frozen in panic when Kimberly said she was pregnant. He wasn't the man who wrote a letter instead of staying to fight for them. He was someone willing to face the consequences, someone ready to try. He zipped the suitcase close, and he whispered, as if fate were listening. He had no idea how close he was to the moment that would change everything. The pediatric wing was alive with the usual sounds: rolling carts, soft murmurs, the distant cry of a toddler resisting a checkup. Kimberly walked through the corridor, with Laura's tiny hand wrapped in hers. At 3 years old, Laura moved with a curious bounce, pausing to stare at posters of cartoon animals on the walls. "Mommy, look! The lion is smiling." Laura giggled. Kimberly smiled gently, adjusting her white coat. Yes, baby. Come on. Let's get your checkup done so we can grab a treat after. A nurse waved them toward exam room 4, and Kimberly lifted Laura onto the table. The child's curls framed her face, her bright eyes filled with excitement, not fear. Kimberly loved that about her daughter. Even in a hospital, she found wonder. As she prepared the stethoscope, she felt a small tug at her coat. "Mommy," Laura asked, "is this where you help the kids?" "Yes, sweetheart." "Do they cry?" "Sometimes." "What do you do?" "I take care of them," Kimberly said, brushing a curl from Laura's forehead. "Just like I take care of you." Laura smiled proudly. Kimberly turned to the cabinet for supplies and froze. She heard a voice, a man's voice, a voice that lived in her memories, in her heartbreak, in the quiet ache she thought she'd buried deep enough. She whipped around. There he was, David, standing in the doorway of the pediatric wing, holding paperwork against his chest, looking like the years had carved something heavy into him. His eyes scanned the busy corridor, then found her, and everything inside him shattered. Kimberly's breath stopped. Her fingers tightened around the counter. Her heart thudded painfully against her ribs as a wave of shock, rage, panic, and old wounds surged through her. She hadn't seen him in 3 years. 3 years of raising Laura alone. 3 years of stitching herself together. 3 years of convincing herself she no longer needed him, no longer wanted answers from him. Yet seeing him again was like being thrown back into that apartment doorway on the night he left, pregnant, shaking, begging him not to go. Her voice barely formed. What are you doing here?" David didn't move. Couldn't. His eyes were locked on Laura, on the child whose face carried echoes of his own. Laura tilted her head curiously. "Mommy, why is that man staring at us?" Kimberly's heart cracked at the innocence in her daughter's voice. David stepped forward, but slowly, like he was afraid the moment might collapse if he breathed too hard. His voice trembled. She... Kimberly pulled Laura gently behind her, instinctive protection flooding her. Her voice turned sharp. "You don't get to ask that." David swallowed hard, eyes glistening. He looked at Laura again, really looked, and Kimberly saw something break open inside him. Something he'd been carrying for years. Guilt, recognition, love he never earned, responsibility that had finally caught up to him. "Kim," he whispered. "She looks just like, she's my daughter." Kimberly cut in firmly. Laura peeked around her mother's hip and blinked at the stranger with large, curious eyes. His eyes. David's throat tightened. "She's beautiful." Kimberly flinched at the softness in his voice. It was the same softness he once used with her. "What are you doing here, David?" she demanded. "I came back," he said carefully. He looked older, more worn, more grounded. "I just needed to see you. I needed to make things right." Kimberly felt her pulse spike with anger. 3 years too late. He winced. "I know. I know I don't deserve anything. Not forgiveness, not explanations, not even this moment. But I swear I didn't come to cause pain. Laura tugged Kimberly's hand again. Mommy? Who is he? Kimberly's lips parted, but words refused to come. How could she explain something she still hadn't healed from? David took a small step closer. I'm someone who made a terrible mistake. Laura blinked. Do you know my mommy? His eyes filled with tears. Yes, he whispered. I knew her very well. Kimberly's chest tightened painfully. A nurse called from down the hall. Dr. Reed, we're ready to review Laura's chart when you are. Kimberly nodded stiffly, then looked back at David. We're talking outside now. The parking lot air was crisp, sun beginning to dip, casting long shadows across the pavement. Kimberly crossed her arms, standing a few feet away from him, keeping the physical and emotional space she needed. David ran a hand through his hair, exhaling shakily. Kim? I'm sorry. That word means nothing, she snapped. I know, he whispered, but it's all I have to start with. You left me, she said, voice trembling. You left me pregnant and terrified. You left me to raise her alone. You left without looking back. He closed his eyes, pained. I've regretted it every day since. She scoffed. Regret doesn't erase responsibility. I know that, too. He swallowed hard. Kim, when I saw her, I can't explain it. I felt something in me just break. Good, she said coldly. Maybe now you understand even a fraction of what I went through. He nodded, tears forming. I deserve that. Kimberly looked away, fighting the sting in her chest. The wound didn't feel fresh, but it did feel reopened. This isn't about you, she said. It's about her. And I won't let you come in here and disrupt her life. I don't want to disrupt anything, he said, voice cracking. I just want a chance to know her, even if it's supervised, even if it's small, even if you can't forgive me. Kimberly's breath caught, because for the first time, she saw something unfamiliar in him. Humility, accountability, sincerity, rooted in pain he clearly carried for years. Still, she couldn't let emotion sway her. You don't get a chance because you want it, she said. You get it because you earn it. He nodded slowly. Then let me try. Kimberly clenched her jaw, heart pounding with conflict, anger battling truth, hurt battling the part of her that once loved him deeply. Behind her, inside the hospital, Laura laughed. Pure, innocent, unaware of the storm brewing outside. Kimberly inhaled shakily. This wasn't a decision she could make lightly. Not today. Not now. She stepped back, needing space. David swallowed, voice breaking as he asked, Kim, should a man like me even get a second chance? Her eyes softened, not with forgiveness, but with the weight of impossible choices. We'll see, she said quietly. But right now, you need to leave. David nodded, devastated, but accepting. He stepped away slowly, looking at the hospital door, knowing his daughter was behind it. As he reached his car, he whispered one word into the air, "Please," and Kimberly stood frozen in the fading light, knowing the past she escaped had just collided with her future. The Willow Park Cafe always smelled faintly of roasted almonds and cinnamon, a warm contrast to the cold evening air outside. Kimberly stepped in with her guard raised high, her breath steady, but her pulse fierce beneath her chest. The bell above the door chimed softly, announcing her arrival. David was already there. He stood when he saw her, as if he didn't deserve the right to remain seated in her presence. His hands were clasped together, knuckles pale, eyes filled with a fragile hope that she refused to acknowledge. "Kim," he said softly, "thank you for coming." She took her seat without responding to that. Her silence was intentional, controlled, the kind that demanded truth before anything else. David sat down slowly, almost nervously. The waitress approached with 2 teas. He had already ordered hers, chamomile, just how she liked it. She noticed. She also ignored it. When the waitress walked away, the tension between them grew heavy. "Say what you came to say," Kimberly began. "I didn't come here for small talk." David swallowed. "I know, and I won't waste your time." He looked down, then back up, meeting her eyes with a vulnerability she had not seen in him since before he left. "Kim, I am sorry. Truly, deeply sorry. I was a coward. I was selfish. I hurt you in a way I can never undo." Kimberly's jaw tightened. "You didn't just hurt me, David. You abandoned me. You abandoned our child." He inhaled sharply at the word "our," as if it cut through layers he had tried to bury. "I know," he whispered, "and I live with that guilt every single day. I have for 3 years. Her expression didn't soften. "You don't get points for regret," she said. "You get accountability." He nodded. "That's exactly why I wanted to meet. I need to tell you everything. No excuses, no justifications, just truth." She didn't respond, but her steady stare urged him to continue. David leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table, voice low. "When you told me you were pregnant, I panicked. Not because I didn't love you, but because I felt completely inadequate. I had the San Francisco promotion dangling in front of me. I felt everyone watching, expecting, pressuring. I thought I had to choose between a future I worked my entire life for and the life we were building together." He exhaled heavily. I chose wrong." Kimberly clenched her hands under the table. "You chose yourself." "Yes," he said quietly, "I did. And it was the biggest mistake of my life." She didn't flinch, but her heart tightened with old pain. David continued, voice cracking slightly. "I was scared of failing you, scared of becoming my worst fear, a man who runs when responsibility gets too heavy. But instead of fighting, I ran. I told myself you would be better off without me. I convinced myself I would only ruin your life." Kimberly scoffed. You didn't trust me enough to believe we could handle things together. You're right, he said, shoulders sagging. I didn't trust myself either. And I paid for it every day. Kimberly leaned back slowly, her face unreadable. So what now? What exactly do you want from me? He hesitated, just a beat, before answering. A chance, he said. Not a chance with you romantically. Not yet. Not unless you ever wanted that someday. I'm not asking for that now. What I want, what I hope for, is a chance to be in Laura's life. Kimberly's eyes narrowed. You expect me to just hand her over to you after everything? David shook his head quickly. No, I don't expect anything. I know I have no right to be called her father. I know I missed everything. Her first steps, her first words, her first birthday. All the late nights you stayed awake alone. All the mornings she probably woke up calling for help, and you were the one who answered. I know I wasn't there. Emotion thickened his voice. But I want to start, even if it's slow, even if it's supervised, even if she never calls me Dad. I just want to show up. I want to earn whatever place you think I deserve in her life. Kimberly looked away, blinking against emotion she didn't want to feel. After a moment, she spoke quietly but firmly. You say you want a chance. Fine. But you need to understand something, David. She turned back to him, eyes sharp with conviction. My daughter is not a healing project. She is not your redemption story. She's a little girl who has known nothing but stability and love. I won't allow anyone to come into her life and disrupt that. Not even you. I understand, he whispered. No, she corrected, leaning in. You think you understand. But this is not about how guilty you feel or how ready you believe you are. It's about whether I can trust you not to disappear again. David's voice broke. I won't. Not ever again. You said that before, she reminded. He winced, pain flickering through his eyes. I know. And if you never trust me completely again, I'll accept that. But please, let me try to be someone she can eventually rely on. Kimberly studied him carefully. The man she once planned a life with. The man who shattered her heart. The man who now sat in genuine remorse. There was sincerity in him now. A steadiness she didn't recognize in the old David. A maturity shaped by suffering, loneliness, and self-reflection. Still, forgiveness was not a switch. It was a battle. You want access to her? Kimberly asked. Then we start on my terms, and only mine. David nodded immediately. Whatever you decide, you will not see her alone. Ever. Not yet. Of course. You will not tell her you're her father. She is too young. She won't understand. I won't say a word, he promised. You will respect her boundaries. If she's shy, you don't push. If she's unsure, you wait. I will, and you will prove consistency. Not for a week, not for a month, but for however long it takes. David nodded again, eyes reddening. I'll show up every time. I swear it. Kimberly took a slow breath and released it. Her voice softened, barely, but enough to shift something between them. Then I'll allow supervised visits, short ones, public places. I'll be present for all of them. A tremor of relief passed through David. Thank you, he whispered. Don't thank me, she replied. This isn't about you. It's about what's best for Laura. He nodded, wiping a quiet tear. The silence stretched between them, but it was not hostile. It was heavy with the weight of truth spoken and truth received. After a long moment, Kimberly added softly, If you ever hurt her, in any way, I will remove you from her life immediately. No second chances, no conversations, no explanations. David's voice shook as he replied, I would never hurt her, and I won't give you a reason to doubt me again. She looked at him carefully. Good, because this time, it's not my heart at risk. It's hers. David's gaze lowered, full of a humility that seemed new, born from years of regret. What's next? He asked, quietly. Kimberly took a long sip of her tea before answering. Saturday, she said. 1 hour. At the park near my home. She loves the swings. A small, broken smile appeared on David's face. I'll be there. You'd better be, she replied. The waitress returned to refill their water glasses, sensing the gravity, but saying nothing. When she walked away, Kimberly rose from her seat. David quickly followed. She looked at him one last time before leaving. Let's see how this goes, she said softly. Don't make promises you can't keep. He nodded. I won't. Kimberly pulled her coat tight around her as she stepped into the cool night air. She exhaled a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Behind the window, David watched her go, not with entitlement, but with gratitude and determination. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. And beginnings, he now understood, were precious chances he would not waste again. Saturday morning arrived with a soft warmth in the air. One of those early spring days where winter finally loosened its grip. Kimberly stood by the window of her Brooklyn apartment, tying Laura's small pink jacket as the little girl wriggled with excitement. Mommy, we go park now? Laura asked, hopping on her toes. Yes, baby. We're going in a minute, Kimberly said gently, brushing a curl away from her daughter's forehead. She forced herself to sound calm, composed. Inside, her nerves were anything but. Today would be the first day David saw Laura intentionally, face to face, not by accident in a hospital lobby. A supervised hour, a controlled environment, a place where Kimberly could watch every interaction and measure every word he spoke. Laura didn't know this man was her father. As far as she was concerned, he was just a friendly adult from Mommy's job whose face she briefly saw once. Nothing more. Kimberly intended to keep it that way. For now, she grabbed her bag, lifted Laura into her arms, and headed out. The park near her building was simple, quiet, and filled with families easing into the weekend. A few children ran across the open field with kites, while others shouted happily on the playground. David stood near the swings, hands tucked into his jacket pockets, shoulders tense, eyes scanning anxiously until he spotted them. Kimberly watched his expression shift when he saw Laura. Something in him broke and bloomed at the same time. His posture softened, his eyes warmed, and nervousness fought against joy as he stepped forward carefully, respectfully. "Hi, Laura," he said softly. "Nice to see you again." Laura tilted her head curiously, clutching her stuffed dinosaur. "Hi, Mr. Herbert," she whispered. Kimberly almost laughed, not because of the name itself, but because watching this powerful man melt at a toddler's mispronunciation was almost surreal. David laughed quietly, kneeling. "Herbert is a good name for your dinosaur," he said, "but you can call me David." Laura considered this, then nodded. "Hi, David." Her voice was sweet and simple. No weight, no history, no pain. Kimberly felt her chest tighten at that innocence. "Would you like to swing?" he asked. She turned to her mother. "Mommy, swing?" Kimberly nodded. "I'm right here, baby." David gently lifted her into the child swing. Even that moment, the way he checked her straps twice, the cautious touch, said volumes about how seriously he was taking this. He gave her a careful push. "Higher!" She giggled. "Not too high," Kimberly called. Arms crossed, but eyes softening despite herself. David smiled. "Okay, medium, high." He pushed her again, letting her laughter fill the air. Kimberly stood only a few feet away, watching how naturally he interacted with their daughter. David was gentle, patient, warm. Every few seconds, he checked her expression to be sure she was comfortable. He wasn't trying to impress Kimberly. He was genuinely connecting. That mattered. After a while, Laura pointed toward the slide. "Go there." David glanced at Kimberly for permission. She nodded, though she stayed close. He walked beside Laura as she climbed the small ladder. "Be careful," he said softly, hands ready, but not hovering too close. What Kimberly noticed most was how he seemed to memorize everything, her little mannerisms, her favorite words, the way she held her dinosaur like a treasured friend, as if he were afraid to miss even a second. After 20 minutes, Laura ran off to examine a row of planted flowers nearby, still within arm's reach. Kimberly sat on a bench. David hesitated before asking quietly, "May I sit?" "Go ahead," she replied. He sat with a respectful gap between them. A moment passed before he spoke again. "Thank you for letting me be here today." She kept her eyes on Laura. "This for her, not for us." "I know," he said softly, "but still, thank you." Kimberly didn't respond immediately. The truth was complicated. Watching him today stirred something in her she didn't want to name. Not yet. "I need to see consistency," she finally said. "Not excitement, not guilt, not emotion. Consistency. You will," he promised. "We'll see." He nodded, accepting her doubt without argument. After a few quiet seconds, he asked. "What does she like? Besides swings and dinosaurs?" Kimberly allowed herself a small smile. "She loves music. Any kind. She dances when she thinks no one is watching." David smiled. Soft, sad, grateful. "I'd love to see that someday." Kimberly didn't answer, but she didn't dismiss the idea either. "Mommy, story," Laura shouted, running back to them and holding a small board book. Kimberly opened her mouth to offer, but David spoke gently. "May I read to her?" Kimberly hesitated. Laura plopped herself down on the grass, waiting. "Fine," Kimberly said slowly, "but I'm right here." David nodded gratefully and knelt beside Laura. He opened the book, a simple story about animals playing in a meadow. His voice was calm, warm, animated in a way that genuinely surprised Kimberly. He gave the rabbit a funny voice that made Laura giggle uncontrollably. He whispered the lion's lines dramatically, pretending to roar softly at the end, which sent her rolling with laughter. Kimberly felt something unfamiliar wash over her. A grief for all the moments he missed, but also a tenderness for the way he was trying now. When the story ended, Laura leaned against his arm, completely comfortable. David froze, overwhelmed by the tiny gesture. Kimberly saw his eyes glisten. "Again," Laura demanded. He laughed. "You want it again?" She nodded enthusiastically. He read it 2 more times. By the time Easter arrived, David had been consistent, never late, always gentle, always following Kimberly's rules. Laura no longer hesitated around him. She reached for him during their park outings, brought him rocks she thought were treasures, and offered him her snacks. Kimberly couldn't deny the truth. David was earnestly showing up. So when her parents invited him to Easter service, she didn't object. She wasn't ready to explain everything to Laura yet, but she was ready to let him witness the life she'd built. Inside Mount Zion Church, David walked respectfully beside Kimberly and Laura, dressed neatly but not overly formal. The choir's voices filled the sanctuary. The congregation swayed. Incense floated faintly in the air. Laura sat between them, legs swinging, eyes wide with excitement. During a lively hymn, she raised both arms. Kimberly laughed softly, steadying her. David watched them with an expression that could only be described as awe. After service, the Jackson family gathered in the fellowship hall. Doreen hugged Laura, then greeted David with caution wrapped in polite warmth. Walter shook David's hand with firm intention. "You've been consistent," he said. "Keep it that way." Aunt Valerie arrived last, hands on hips, eyes narrowed like she was examining suspicious produce. She said at David. "You still here?" David swallowed. "Yes, ma'am." She circled him once, slowly. Then, "Well, for now, that's all right." Kimberly nearly choked, holding back a laugh. At dinner, Laura climbed into David's lap without hesitation. She fed him pieces of cornbread, giggling when crumbs fell onto his pants. "My dress," she shouted suddenly, pointing her tiny finger at her own Easter outfit. David played along. "It's beautiful. You look like a princess." Laura beamed. Kimberly watched the scene unfold, heart tight with something she hadn't let herself feel in years. Trust, or the beginning of it. After dinner, as they all said goodbye outside, Laura wrapped her arms around David's leg in an affectionate toddler hug. He froze, stunned, before slowly, carefully bending down to hug her back. Kimberly's breath caught, and she realized something. This wasn't just a step. It wasn't just progress. It was the foundation of forgiveness, slowly, quietly forming. Not forgiveness for the past, but permission for a future. A future she once thought impossible. It happened on a Thursday evening, one of those deceptively calm nights where everything appears normal until the ground shifts beneath your feet. Kimberly had just finished cooking dinner, and Laura was twirling in the living room with her stuffed dinosaur, humming a made-up tune. "Mommy, look, spin," she laughed, wobbling slightly, before falling into a pile of pillows. But the laughter changed. It cracked, turned into a small cough. Kimberly didn't react at first. Kids coughed all the time. But then came another cough, deeper, followed by a tiny whimper that made Kimberly stop mid-step. "Laura," she called, walking toward her. Laura sat on the floor, her cheeks flushed, her breathing quicker than usual. She reached for Kimberly, but winced as though her chest hurt. "Mommy." Tummy. Hot. Kimberly's heart dropped. She pressed her hand to Laura's forehead. Burning. Not warm. Burning. "Oh, God," she whispered. She grabbed her stethoscope from the counter, habit she never outgrew, and listened. The breathing sounded tight, labored, too fast, not normal, not safe, not something to wait and see. Her instincts sharpened instantly. Pediatric resident or not, she was a mother first, and this was no ordinary fever. She grabbed her coat, wrapped Laura in a blanket, and bolted out the door. But before she reached the street, she froze. She needed help, not medical. She knew what to do. She needed support. Her hands trembled as she unlocked her phone. Her thumb hovered for half a second before pressing the name she once feared dialing. David. He picked up on the first ring. "Kim? It's Laura," she breathed, already rushing down the stairs. "She's burning up, breathing fast. We're going to the hospital." His voice cracked instantly. "I'm coming." "Which one?" "New York Presbyterian." "I'm on my way." The emergency room felt colder than usual. Bright lights, beeping monitors, the hurried footsteps of nurses performing midnight miracles, but all Kimberly could focus on was the terrified rhythm of her own heartbeat. A nurse led them to a pediatric bay. Temperature 103.8. Respiratory rate elevated, she noted quickly. Laura whimpered against Kimberly's chest, her small hands trembling. "Mommy, hold me." "I'm right here," Kimberly whispered, kissing her forehead again and again. A pediatric physician examined her. Kimberly stood beside him, forcing herself to stay composed, answering every question with precision even though her insides twisted. Possible infection. Possible pneumonia. Possible complications. Words she had once studied now stabbed her with personal fear. The nurse placed an oxygen cannula near Laura's tiny nose. She flinched, cried weakly. Kimberly's throat tightened. She stroked her daughter's curls, barely holding herself together. Then she felt a presence, a familiar, trembling presence, behind her. David, his expression shattered at the sight of Laura lying small and weak on the hospital bed. He stepped forward slowly, as if afraid the moment would break. "Kim, what happened?" he whispered, voice raw. Kimberly couldn't answer. Her voice cracked. A tear slipped down her cheek before she could hide it. She got sick so fast. Without hesitation, David moved beside her. "I'm here. I'm not leaving." She didn't respond, but she didn't push him away. He looked down at Laura, jaw clenching with emotion. "Hey, sweetheart. It's okay. We're right here." Laura opened her eyes slightly and murmured something soft. Too soft to understand. Kimberly Browell. Her shoulders shook. She covered her mouth with her hand, trying to sob in front of medical staff. David stepped closer. "Kim, look at me." She didn't. "Kim," he repeated gently, "you don't have to be strong alone." His voice wasn't demanding. It wasn't dramatic. It was steady, quiet, the kind of voice a man uses when he finally learns how to show up. Her chest heaved, and finally, she turned toward him. Their eyes locked. 3 years of pain, fear, betrayal, love, and unfinished emotion collided in one devastating, silent moment. And then he did something she didn't expect. He reached for her hand, slowly, as if giving her the chance to refuse. But she didn't. She needed something to hold on to. Just for this moment, their fingers intertwined. Her tears fell freely now, and she leaned her forehead against his shoulder. He wrapped his arm around her, grounding her as Laura's monitor beeped rhythmically beside them. For the first time since she gave birth, she let herself crumble, and he held every broken piece. Hours passed with tests, fluids, breathing treatments. The physicians worked quickly and gently, and slowly Laura's breathing eased. Kimberly sat in a chair beside the bed, Laura curled against her chest. David sat directly beside them, close enough to touch, close enough to share the weight of the moment. When the nurse finally said, "She's stabilizing," Kimberly exhaled so deeply it felt like oxygen was returning to her body after years without air. David slumped forward, covering his face with both hands. When he looked up again, tears streaked down his cheeks. "Oh, thank God. Thank God," he whispered. Kimberly wiped Laura's forehead carefully. "She's okay," she murmured, voice breaking. "She's okay." David's voice trembled. "I've never been so scared in my life." Kimberly looked at him, not with anger this time, but with a fragile, aching honesty. "I know," she said. "Me too." Silence lingered. Nah, tense, not cold, soft, human. David glanced at her again, then at Laura, then back at her. "You're an incredible mother," he said quietly. "The way you held her, the way you didn't panic. I've never seen strength like that." Kimberly looked down, cheeks warm. "You were strong, too?" "No," he said gently. "I just followed your lead." For a moment, the world around them faded. The monitors, the footsteps in the hall, the hum of hospital machinery. Only the three of them existed. A family, however broken, however mended. Still a family. Then it happened. The moment that surprised them both. Kimberly leaned toward him, just slightly, as if drawn by gravity she couldn't resist. He leaned in, too. Their lips met in a slow, trembling kiss, one filled with exhaustion, fear, relief, and something deeper they hadn't allowed themselves to feel since the day he left. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't planned. It wasn't even romantic in the traditional sense. It was a rebirth, a fragile spark of the love they buried but never destroyed. When they pulled away, both breathless, Kimberly looked at him with gentle warning in her eyes. "This doesn't fix everything," she whispered. "I know," he said, "but it's real." She didn't deny it. Laura stirred softly between them, her tiny hand resting on Kimberly's chest, and then reaching out to touch David's wrist. Her touch connected them like a small, innocent bridge. Kimberly inhaled shakily. David's eyes softened. In that quiet, dimly lit hospital room, something shifted. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but the first true fusion of the family they were meant to be. Fear had broken them. Love, slow, steady, healing, was beginning to rebuild. Laura recovered over the next several days with a resilience that amazed everyone. Kimberly remained at her bedside every hour, and David refused to leave the hospital until the doctors discharged her. It was the first time Kimberly saw him fully present. Not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but from a place of genuine devotion. When Laura was finally stable enough to return home, David followed Kimberly and Laura out of the hospital with a careful distance, as if unsure of his place but unwilling to disappear again. Back at the apartment, the world felt different. Not easier, not magically healed, but different. Shared, warmer. Kimberly laid Laura in her bed, smoothing her curls, humming softly, until her daughter drifted into a peaceful sleep. When she stepped out into the living room, she found David sitting on the edge of the couch, hands clasped tightly, eyes soft with worry. "Is she okay?" he asked quietly. "She's sleeping," Kimberly whispered. "Her breathing is steady now." He exhaled deeply, almost collapsing into relief. "I've never felt fear like that," he said. Kimberly nodded slowly. "Neither have I. Not like that." A pause settled between them. Not dense, just reflective. He looked around her apartment, taking in the framed photos on the wall, the small bookshelf of children's books, the basket of toys near the corner. "This is a good home," he said. "It's ours," she replied, her voice gentle but firm. He swallowed, as though the word ours echoed louder than intended. After a moment, Kimberly sighed. David, what you did at the hospital, how you showed up, I won't forget that. I didn't do anything special, he replied. Yes, you did, she said. You stayed. His eyes lifted. I'll keep staying. Kimberly didn't respond, but she didn't challenge it either. The next few weeks unfolded cautiously, naturally. Kimberly didn't rush into anything, and David didn't push, but he became a steady presence, one that Kimberly noticed more and more. He began coming over during evenings to help with dinner or bath time. He learned how to braid Laura's curls with surprising patience. He repaired a loose cabinet hinge in the kitchen. He carried groceries when Kimberly's hands were full. One day, after fixing a squeaky doorknob, he asked softly, "Do you ever want help consistently? I mean, more than just a visit." Kimberly looked at him carefully. If you're asking whether you can be part of this household, that's not a small step. I know, he said, but I want to take that step with you, with her. She didn't answer immediately. I'm not asking for a room, he added, just a drawer, a toothbrush, something small, something real. Kimberly's breath caught. He wasn't demanding a family. He was asking to earn one. She nodded slowly. A drawer is fine. David smiled, small, grateful, emotional, in a quiet way. Over the next few days, he brought small things, a shaving kit, a couple shirts, a book he read at night. Nothing intrusive, nothing rushed, just presence. One morning, Laura ran up to him as soon as he entered and wrapped her arms around his leg. "Daddy," she giggled. The word froze the room. Kimberly's eyes widened. David's expression broke open. "Laura," Kimberly said gently, "you don't have to call him that yet." But David knelt. Voice soft with reverence he couldn't hide. "You can call me whatever you're comfortable with, sweetheart." Laura touched his cheek and whispered, "Daddy." He closed his eyes, overwhelmed, but didn't correct her. Kimberly watched with a complex mix of fear, healing, and something tender beginning to grow inside her again. Their partnership deepened naturally. Some nights they cooked dinner together. Some evenings they watched a movie after Laura's bedtime, sitting carefully apart until the space between them slowly shrank. They laughed more now, talked more honestly. When arguments came, they were not explosive, but mature. Two people learning each other again, rebuilding communication from the ground up. One night, after Laura fell asleep early, Kimberly stood at the stove stirring pasta sauce. David approached quietly. "You know," he said softly, "you look different now." "How?" she asked, glancing at him. "Stronger," he said, "but also softer. You let people in when it matters. I didn't understand that before." Kimberly felt warmth flicker through her chest. "And you," she asked, "what changed you?" He didn't hesitate. "Losing you." Their eyes met. A long, quiet moment stretched between them. He reached out and brushed a curl from her cheek. Not demanding, not assuming, just gentle. "Kim," he whispered, "I don't want to rebuild what we had. I want to build something new, something worthy of you." Of her. Her heart pulled at the sincerity, etched into every word. She stepped closer, slowly, intentionally. "Then show me," she whispered. And he did. Their kiss, this time, wasn't born from crisis. It wasn't shaky or desperate. It was slow, warm, confident. Two people choosing each other again, not out of pain, but out of hope. A few weeks later, after many quiet nights and shared mornings, after many smiles and cautious dreams, David asked Kimberly to take a walk with him after Sunday service at Mount Zion. The sun glowed gently through stained glass windows as the congregation filed out. The choir hummed in the background, voices carrying softly into the hallway. "Come with me," David said, holding her hand. She followed him outside onto the church steps, where the breeze lifted her curls and children played joyfully across the yard. David turned to her, breath trembling with emotion. "Kim," he began, "I've been given a second chance at life, at love, at fatherhood, and I never want to waste another moment." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Kimberly gasped, tears gathering before she could stop them. "I hurt you. I left you. I lost everything that mattered," he said. "But you gave me the chance to become a better man. And Laura gave me the chance to become a father." He opened the box. A simple ring, elegant, time, say, a symbol of renewal, not replacement. "I want to build a future with you," he whispered. "A home, a family, a love that heals more than it hurts. Kimberly, will you marry me?" Behind them, the church doors opened, and Aunt Valerie froze mid-step. "Oh, Lord," she muttered loudly. "It's happening." Laura ran toward them, giggling. "Mommy, Mommy, look." Kimberly covered her mouth, tears slipping down her cheeks. She looked at David, at the man who left, the man who broke her, the man who returned healed and ready to heal her too. She nodded. "Yes," she whispered through tears. "Yes, David, I will." He lifted her into a soft, joyful embrace as the congregation burst into applause behind them. Laura clapped too, having no idea what a proposal meant, only that her parents were happy and hugging. Kimberly kissed David with certainty she had never felt before. The past no longer defined them. The future did. The months leading up to the wedding unfolded with a rhythm that felt almost unreal to Kimberly. Gentle mornings, shared responsibilities, laughter filling the home instead of tension. David had moved into a different apartment only a block away, out of respect for pacing and boundaries. But he spent most evenings helping with dinner or reading bedtime stories to Laura. Their lives began weaving naturally into a pattern that didn't feel forced or rushed. It felt earned. And now, standing in the church foyer on the morning of her wedding, Kimberly felt the weight of everything she had survived settle around her, not as a burden, but as a crown. The bridal suite at Mount Zion was lit with soft daylight filtering through lace curtains. The room carried the familiar echo of gospel harmonies drifting through the walls as the choir warmed up. The scent of hairspray, pressed fabric, and blooming lilies filled the air. Kimberly sat before a mirror, wearing a gown that flowed with understated elegance. Her curls were pinned softly behind her shoulders, a few strands left loose to frame her face. Aunt Valerie fluffed the back of the dress and stepped back to admire her. She said with a satisfied hum. Now this, how a woman looks when God restores what life tried to take. Kimberly smiled, heart warm. Aunt Valerie. Don't Aunt Valerie me, the woman said, waving her hand. You know good and well. You look blessed this morning. Kimberly laughed, shaking her head. Her mother adjusted the small pearl necklace around her daughter's neck, tears slipping down her cheeks. You deserve this, Doreen whispered. Every bit of it. Thank you, Mommy, Kimberly breathed, voice trembling. Then the door swung open, and Laura burst in, wearing a tiny cream-colored dress, tulle bouncing around her knees. She clutched her stuffed dinosaur in one hand and threw the other into the air proudly. Mommy, look! I'm a princess, too. Kimberly scooped her into her arms, kissing her cheek. Yes, you are. And the prettiest one here. Laura beamed and wriggled out of her embrace. Mommy? Daddy said I can walk with him. Kimberly blinked, warmth blooming inside her. He did? Laura nodded vigorously, curls bouncing. Aunt Valerie smirked. That man is trying to make sure those vows hit your heart twice. Kimberly didn't respond, but her smile gave her away. In a quiet room on the opposite side of the church, David stood before a mirror, adjusting his tie for the 5th time. Walter stepped behind him and slapped his back lightly. You keep fidgeting like that, boy. She's gonna think you're planning to run again. David winced. I'm not going anywhere. Walter's expression softened. I know, and that's why you're here today. David nodded, eyes briefly watering before he blinked them clear. Thank you for giving me a chance. You earned that, Walter said firmly. Now go marry my daughter. The sanctuary filled slowly. Family, church members, neighbors, Kimberly's co-workers, people who had watched her raise Laura with steady hands and an unshakable heart. The organ played softly overhead. The air was charged with anticipation. David stood at the altar, chest rising and falling, with deep, steadying breaths. When the double doors opened, the room quieted. Laura stepped in first, holding a small basket of white petals. Her face lit up when saw David. Daddy, look, she whispered loudly and tossed petals with dramatic flair. The congregation chuckled, charmed. Behind her, escorted by her father, Kimberly entered. Time shifted. David felt everything, every regret, every healing moment, every hard-earned step that brought them here, collide inside him. She looked radiant, but more than that, she looked strong. A woman who walked through heartbreak and came out with her head high. A woman who rebuilt her life, brick by brick. A woman who chose him again, not because she needed him, but because she wanted a future where love could thrive, not break. As she approached the altar, David's breath trembled. Walter kissed her cheek and placed her hand in David's. "Don't waste this," he whispered quietly. "I won't," David vowed. The pastor smiled warmly. Today is not just about two people joining in marriage. It is about restoration, about growth, about choosing love with open eyes. The congregation hummed in agreement. David and Kimberly turned to face each other. He spoke first. "Kim, when I walked away, I believed I was doing what was best, but I was wrong. Leaving broke me in ways I couldn't see then. Coming back, learning how to be a father, earning your trust brick by brick, it changed my life. You changed my life." Kimberly blinked through her tears. "I promise," David continued, "to be the man you prayed for, not the man who failed you. I promise to protect this family, to show up every day, to love you with honesty, patience, and humility. Wherever you go, I go. Whatever storms come, I stand beside you. Today and always." A soft murmur filled the church. Then Kimberly took a breath, steady and beautiful. "David," she said softly, "you broke my heart once, but you also taught me the power of forgiveness. You returned when it mattered most. You came back not just to me, but to our daughter. You showed her love. You learned her language. You listened to her laughter and held her fears. Her voice trembled. You became the man I always knew you could be. And because of that, I choose you. Not the man you were, but the man you've become. I promise to walk with you, learn with you, build with you. I promise to create a home filled with laughter, faith, and resilience. And I promise to never let fear guide us again." They exchanged rings meant to symbolize renewal. "By the power vested in me," the pastor declared, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." David leaned in, kissing Kimberly with a tenderness that elicited applause and joyful shouts from the congregation. Aunt Valerie yelled, "'Bout time." Someone in the back hollered, "Amen." Laura tugged David's pant leg excitedly. Daddy, we're a family now." David knelt, scooping her into his arms. "Yes, sweetheart, we are." Kimberly joined them, and for the first time, all three fit perfectly together. The fellowship hall transformed into a vibrant spread of white linens, soft lighting, and floral accents blending both families' cultures. The music alternated between soulful gospel, jazz classics, and soft contemporary love tracks. Kimberly's side of the family brought warmth, jokes, and homemade dishes. David's family contributed quiet emotion, long embraces, and speeches filled with sincerity. Walter lifted a glass. Marriage isn't about forgetting the past. It's about deciding who you want standing with you in the future. Doreen wiped tears the entire night. Aunt Valerie grabbed the microphone unexpectedly. "I been waiting to see these two tie the knot since the day I watched Kimberly stare at that man like he was the last cookie at Christmas." Laughter erupted. David blushed. Kimberly leaned into him, embarrassed but happy. Laura twirled in her new dress, grabbing anyone's hand who would join her on the dance floor. She kept looking between Kimberly and David with pure wonder, as if seeing a picture she had been trying to draw finally become whole. As the night wound down, the narrator's voice, steady, thoughtful, warm, offered the final reflection. Life will break you. Life will test your faith, your heart, your patience. But sometimes the pieces that fall apart are the same pieces that rebuild something stronger. Kimberly learned that love is not blind. It sees everything, even the pain, and still chooses hope. David learned that running from responsibility only leads back to the place where truth waits. And little Laura, she taught them both what family truly means. Showing up, trying again, loving without fear. If you've ever loved, lost, forgiven, or rebuilt, this story is yours too. If this story touched you, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Your likes help more people find stories that heal the heart. Subscribe to Mr. Stevens Stories for more powerful life lessons told through unforgettable journeys. And share this story with someone who believes in second chances.